Do you remember those Christmas foods Grandma never waited to buy in the 1970s? They filled pantries with sweetness, spice, and the promise of celebration. Can you still taste that excitement when the holidays began in her kitchen? Baker's German's sweet chocolate bar was more than just chocolate. It was the start of Christmas itself. Grandma would hide her bars early, tucked behind flour and spices, waiting for the day she would begin her baking. You could always tell when she brought them out because the house filled with that deep cocoa smell that seemed to settle in the walls. She melted it in her old double boiler, careful and patient, like she was handling something sacred. The chocolate flowed thick and glossy into her cake batter, promising sweetness and tradition in every swirl. No one ever touched those bars before December because they were not meant for snacking. They were for memories. Baker's German's was smooth, rich, and loyal, a flavor that never needed improving. It was a piece of history on every Christmas table, and once the cakes cooled, it felt like the holidays had officially arrived. Dream Whip dessert topping mix was the miracle that turned every pie into a masterpiece. Grandma loved it because it did not need refrigeration, and in a crowded 1970s kitchen, that was a blessing. She would pull the little box from the cupboard, whisking milk and powder until it turned into a cloud of sweetness. Dream Whip was not just whipped topping, it was anticipation, the last touch before dessert reached perfection. It crowned lemon meringue pies, coated chocolate puddings, and softened the edges of even the toughest fruitcakes. You could taste the joy in every spoonful, light but indulgent, familiar yet special. Grandma always had an extra box tucked away just in case guests showed up unexpectedly. Dream Whip was holiday assurance, the creamy promise that no dessert would ever feel unfinished. Marble Pound Cake Loaf from Sara Lee was the kind of treat Grandma kept in her freezer like a secret. It was never for everyday eating. It was for surprise company or when she just wanted something to go with coffee. The swirls of chocolate and vanilla looked too perfect to be store-bought. And that was the beauty of it. You could thaw it in minutes, slice it neatly, and serve it on her favorite china like it had come straight from the oven. The cake was soft, buttery, and comforting, a quiet luxury that made even the simplest visits feel festive. Grandma loved that it never failed her. Always the same, always delicious, always ready. In a decade full of instant mixes and boxed meals, this one carried pride. It was her emergency dessert, her Christmas standby, her frozen reminder that hospitality never had to wait. Carnation Instant Non-Fat Dry Milk was one of those things Grandma bought weeks before Christmas, and for good reason. It was not just milk, it was insurance. She used it for fudge, pies, puddings, and any recipe that demanded milk when the real thing was already gone. The box sat on her counter, red and white and reliable, a silent promise that no recipe would ever be ruined by shortage. She would mix it into her baking like second nature, measuring without measuring, trusting the habit of her hands. It made everything smoother, richer, more comforting. Sometimes she even added a spoonful to her coffee just because it made her smile. Carnation's powder was part of the rhythm of the season, a symbol of preparation and care. It proved that you did not need much to make Christmas perfect, just foresight, patience, and love. Shredded coconut snowflake. Tins were small pieces of joy before the baking even began. Grandma would bring them out with ceremony, their glittering metal lids shining under kitchen lights. The smell of coconut filled the air the second the tin opened, sweet and warm like the promise of snow. She sprinkled it over cakes, rolled it into candy balls, and pressed it gently onto frosting until every dessert looked like it had been dusted by winter itself. Kids would steal pinches, pretending they were just helping. The tins emptied fast, but they left behind the prettiest desserts you could imagine. By Christmas morning, the counters sparkled with coconut-covered memories, each bite tasting of sugar and nostalgia. Those tins were more than ingredients. They were decorations, relics of a season that glowed even without snow. Orange slice candy for fruitcake was the sparkle in Grandma's baking. Sticky, bright, and cheerful, those little candies brought life to every loaf. She would slice them with care, mixing them with nuts and raisins until her kitchen looked like a stained glass window in motion. The scent was citrus and sugar and something purely Christmassy. No one could resist sneaking a piece from the mixing bowl. When the fruitcakes came out of the oven, golden and heavy with sweetness, you could see the candies glowing through the crumb. They were simple, affordable, and perfect, a treat that turned practicality into art. Grandma never made just one fruitcake either. She made several, each packed with those orange gems because she knew they would not last long. In every slice, there was joy that money could not buy. Lemon juice bottles sat quietly in the pantry, but they worked wonders. Those green glass bottles were Grandma's secret weapon for glazes, lemon bars, and punch bowls. She said a splash of lemon made everything honest. It balanced all the sugar of December. She would twist off the cap, pour just enough into her bowl, and the whole room would smell brighter. It added sparkle to cakes, depth to frosting, and tang to her famous holiday punch that had people guessing the secret ingredient for years. Lemon made even the simplest desserts taste thoughtful. Grandma never waited to buy it because she knew one bottle was never enough. It was her silent helper, her bottled sunshine, the flavor that kept her kitchen glowing through the coldest nights. Snowdrift. Vegetable shortening was not glamorous, but to Grandma it was gold. She trusted that white can more than any fancy new butter or oil. It made pie crusts flaky, cookies soft, and cakes impossibly light. The can itself looked festive, simple and proud, a kitchen staple that carried its weight in Christmas spirit. Grandma measured it with her eyes, scooping it cleanly and smoothing it with the back of a knife like a ritual. When her pies came out of the oven, golden and perfect, everyone understood why she swore by it. Snowdrift was the kind of ingredient that held up families and traditions at once. It was steady, humble, and completely irreplaceable. Jarred mincemeat filling was both mysterious and magnificent. Grandma always bought it early, long before the stores filled with shoppers. She would hold that glass jar like a treasure, the dark filling inside glistening with fruit and spice. No one really knew what went into it, and she never explained, only calling it her Christmas magic. The smell was unmistakable once it hit the pie shell: apples, raisins, cinnamon, and something deeper, something that felt ancient. Her mince pies were not for everyone, but the ones who loved them swore they tasted like memory itself. It was sweet, warm, and a little grown up. Every Christmas, that jar connected her to generations before her, the kind of tradition that needed no recipe card. Baker's semi-sweet chocolate squares were the definition of Christmas patience. Grandma would melt them slowly over the stove, stirring until they turned into a glossy ribbon of chocolate perfection. It was the smell of home, of fudge cooling on wax paper, and children waiting with spoons. She never rushed it, never used shortcuts, because these squares demanded respect. The result was the smoothest, richest fudge anyone had ever tasted. Never too sweet, never too soft, always just right. Neighbors would bring tins hoping she might share. She never wrote down the recipe, but she always said it started with baker's chocolate and a steady hand. The squares may have been small, but they built empires of holiday joy. Ritz crackers were one of those things Grandma never ran out of in December. The red box sat proudly on the counter, waiting for the parade of cheese balls, dips, and casseroles that made Christmas sparkle. Ritz was more than a cracker. It was a foundation. Grandma crushed them into buttery crumbs to top casseroles or rolled them around deviled ham for church potlucks. The crunch was perfection, light yet rich, and it seemed to make everything taste a little more special. Kids would sneak a few plain, straight from the sleeve, while Grandma looked the other way with a smile. When guests arrived unannounced, she would whip up something fancy in minutes, and Ritz was always the star. The golden round edges and that slightly sweet, salty taste were comfort wrapped in convenience. Back then, buying multiple boxes before Christmas was not excess, it was preparation. You could build a holiday buffet with nothing but Ritz and imagination. Domino brown. Sugar bricks were the kind of ingredient that made you feel powerful just breaking them apart. Grandma kept hers sealed in a tin, and when she opened it, The scent of deep molasses filled the air. The sugar was packed tight, hard enough to need a fork or spoon to loosen. It was the key to gingerbread cookies, caramel glazes, and old-fashioned baked apples that steamed on the windowsill. She measured it by instinct, not by cup, pressing it down and smiling when it held its shape. Domino brown sugar gave her desserts their soul. It made everything darker, warmer, and more alive. When she stirred it into a saucepan for glaze, the sound of the spoon scraping against the pot felt like music. Those bricks softened in her hands, melting into pure sweetness, and by the end, the whole kitchen smelled like heaven. Pineapple tidbits and juice from Dole brought sunshine to the coldest winters. Grandma called them her secret for keeping summer alive through Christmas. She used them in ambrosia salads with marshmallows and coconut, or folded them into what she proudly called her Hawaiian casserole, a sweet, creamy dish that somehow worked. The bright yellow cubes gleamed like little jewels, adding a burst of cheer to every table. They came in small cans, always stored in neat stacks, because one was never enough. The juice never went to waste either. It went into punch bowls or cake batters to add a touch of tropical sweetness. There was something joyful about the way she opened that can, drained it carefully, and smiled at the smell of pineapple. It was her way of adding a little paradise to her Midwestern kitchen. Dole pineapple tidbits were proof that Christmas could taste like sunshine if you wanted it to. Marzetti caramel dip was one of those modern marvels Grandma quietly embraced. She discovered it on a trip to the grocery store and never looked back. That glossy caramel came in a round plastic tub with a lid that never sealed quite right, but the taste made up for it. It was thick, buttery, and just sweet enough to make every apple slice a treat. Grandma would bring it out at church potlucks, spooning it into bowls for dipping red and green apple wedges. The children would gather first, their laughter filling the air as they swirled fruit into caramel like it was liquid gold. Even the grown-ups could not resist. It was festive simplicity in its purest form. No stove, no saucepan, no cleanup. Just caramel joy straight from the container. Marzetti was a new kind of tradition, the bridge between old-fashioned baking and the convenience of the modern grocery aisle. Clabber Girl baking powder was the silent partner behind every successful holiday morning. Grandma trusted that red and white can more than any recipe book. She said it never failed her, and it never did. Whether she was making fluffy biscuits, golden pancakes, or quick breads, that little can made them rise perfectly every time. You could hear the faint fizz as it hit the wet ingredients, a quiet sign that breakfast would soon fill the house with warmth. Clabber Girl sat beside the flour, slightly dusty but dignified, always there when she needed it. She never waited to buy it because Christmas baking without it was unthinkable. The biscuits it made were tall and tender, the kind that melted under butter and honey. Every bite reminded you of patience and practice, the kind of holiday magic that came from doing things the right way. Reynolds aluminum foil in its holiday pack was as much a Christmas essential as tinsel or lights. Grandma bought rolls of it early, certain the stores would sell out before Christmas week. The box had a shimmer to it, promising perfection in every roast and pie. She lined pans, covered turkeys, and wrapped leftovers with military precision. When she folded foil over pies, the crimped edges looked like silver lace. It caught the glow of the kitchen light, reflecting warmth and order in the middle of chaos. Even wrapping leftovers felt festive when done with Reynolds foil. Grandma said it kept food fresher, but maybe it just kept things feeling special. By the end of the season, the empty box was proof of a well-fed family and a job done right. Knox gelatine packets were the magic behind every shimmering dessert on Grandma's table. Those small envelopes looked unassuming, but they held endless creativity. She used them for molded salads that jiggled with pride and creamy, no-bake cheesecakes that stole the spotlight. The process fascinated everyone, boiling, stirring, waiting for the transformation from liquid to jewel-like solid. Sometimes she would suspend fruit inside, and children would stare, amazed at strawberries floating mid-air. Knox was part science, part art, and all nostalgia. The molded desserts were conversation pieces sparkling under candlelight. No Christmas buffet felt complete without one. In a decade when style mattered as much as taste, Knox Gelatine turned simple ingredients into something spectacular. It was proof that even humble packets could make a meal feel like a celebration. Baker's unsweetened cocoa was one of those ingredients Grandma treated like gold. The small tin was always the first thing she bought before the holidays, long before cocoa became trendy again. She used it for hot chocolate, for cakes, and for frostings that tasted like heaven. It had a deep, almost smoky flavor that you could never get from instant mixes. She would whisk it with sugar and milk on the stove, creating cups of comfort for anyone who walked through her door. The smell alone could make a bad day better. For baking, it gave her chocolate cakes that were dense and rich, the kind you could feel in your heart. It was not sweet on its own, but that was the beauty of it. You had to build the sweetness yourself, the same way she built Christmas, one careful touch at a time. Morton salt in the blue canister was one of those items you never thought about but could not live without. Grandma kept one on every shelf, and somehow it was always half full. The little girl with the umbrella on the label felt like family by December. She used Morton salt for everything, for seasoning roasts, preserving nuts, and even brining meats days before Christmas dinner. It was her secret to perfect flavor, and she swore by its purity. A pinch here, a sprinkle there. It was the invisible hand behind every memorable dish. When the lid ran low, she would tap the canister and smile, saying it had just enough left. Morton salt was reliability in blue, the kind of quiet strength that held an entire kitchen together. Domino Confectioner's sugar box was the last touch of magic in Grandma's kitchen. The white box with blue lettering sat proudly on the counter, waiting for its moment. When she opened it, the air would fill with soft clouds of sugar dust, sparkling like frost. She used it for icing, for dusting bundt cakes, for snowing cookies with sweetness. It transformed ordinary desserts into something ethereal, light as air but full of joy. Grandma's hands would be dusted white by the end of the day, and she always laughed about looking like a snowman. Every Christmas treat she made wore that same finishing touch, a reminder that beauty and flavor could be simple. Domino sugar made everything feel a little more like winter wonder, a little more like home. The box itself became part of the tradition, its corners worn soft from years of use. She never measured it precisely, just let it fall like snow until it looked right. Even the way she sifted it was graceful, like watching someone wrap love in sweetness. Children would wait at the edge of the counter, hoping for the first taste of icing scraped from the bowl. That sugar was the finishing note of every memory, proof that small touches often meant the most. Canned asparagus spears were one of those rare things Grandma called a holiday luxury. They were expensive enough that she only bought them once a year, usually around the same time she started her Christmas shopping. She would chill them overnight and serve them on a glass platter lined with lettuce, each spear glistening under the kitchen lights. A spoonful of mayonnaise went on top, followed by a gentle dusting of paprika that gave it that festive glow. It was elegance on a budget, the kind of dish that looked fancier than it really was. The texture was soft, tender, and a little briny, but no one complained because it was a sign of the season. Guests would take small portions, savoring the novelty of having asparagus in December. Grandma always smiled, proud that something so simple could feel so special. Those canned spears might not have been garden fresh, but they carried the same care as any homemade dish. Every bite reminded everyone at the table that Christmas was not about extravagance, it was about intention. The asparagus platter always stood beside the ham and cranberry relish, understated but dignified. The clink of the serving fork against the dish marked its presence, quiet but constant. In a decade of frozen foods and boxed mixes, it was still her nod to refinement, her way of saying celebration without saying excess. It was love served cold, delicate, and deliberate. Ginger snap crumbs were Grandma's secret ingredient long before anyone called it clever. She used them for pie crusts instead of graham crackers, crushing them with a rolling pin until the kitchen smelled like warm spice and molasses. Lemon pies, pumpkin pies, even cheesecake, all of them got a ginger snap base in her hands. The flavor added a kick that balanced the sweetness perfectly. You could taste the Christmas spirit in every crumb: ginger, cinnamon, and just a whisper of heat. She never bought pre-made crusts, claiming they lacked character. Instead, she pressed those crumbs by hand into pans, humming while she worked. The edges browned beautifully in the oven, crisp and fragrant, making every dessert feel more alive. When guests asked for her recipe, she always said it was nothing special, though everyone knew it was. Those crumbs were proof that even leftovers from a cookie jar could build something unforgettable. The crunch was just right, sturdy but tender, like a memory that refuses to fade. She saved every broken cookie from tins throughout December, knowing they would find a second life. It was resourcefulness disguised as creativity, and it gave her desserts a story baked into every bite. No one ever looked at pie the same way again after hers. Pillsbury crescent rolls were the magic trick Grandma relied on when time was tight and guests were plenty. That silver tube popping open on the counter was the sound of convenience meeting celebration. She rolled out the dough with care, smiling as the buttery scent filled the room before it even hit the oven. Sometimes she baked them plain, golden, and soft, piled high in a bread basket with a linen cloth. Other times, she filled them with ham and cheese, turning them into tiny sandwiches that vanished faster than she could make them. For brunch casseroles, she layered them on top like a buttery quilt that baked to perfection. The crescent rolls were her little indulgence. Store-bought, yes, but no one ever cared. They flaked, melted, and tasted like home. That pop of the tube still feels like Christmas morning. Sudden, joyful, and a little bit messy in the best way possible. The dough never failed her, not once, and that reliability became part of her calm during the rush. Even the children begged to help roll them, giggling as they shaped them into imperfect crescents. The sound of the timer and the smell of butter became signals that the holiday had begun. Those little rolls were more than food. They were a tradition that said warmth, welcome, and just enough ease to keep the joy in cooking. Swiss Miss marshmallow lovers. Cocoa packets were the definition of happiness for the grandkids. Grandma always kept a box tucked behind the tea tins, waiting for the right cold night. She would pour steaming milk into mugs, tear open those shiny packets, and let the cocoa swirl like magic. The extra marshmallows, tiny and sweet, floated to the top like snowflakes on chocolate. Kids would sip carefully, hands wrapped around the warm cup, eyes glowing brighter than the tree lights. It was instant comfort, a kind of joy you could taste. Even the adults would sneak a cup when no one was looking. The smell filled the living room, sweet, cozy, unmistakably Christmas. Swiss Miss was not fancy, but it was the kind of treat that brought everyone together by the fire, laughing and remembering what warmth really felt like. The crinkle of the packet, the swirl of the spoon, the faint hiss of milk on the stove, all of it became part of the soundtrack of December. Grandma made it a ritual: cocoa, carols, and the soft hum of contentment that only winter nights can bring. The marshmallows always melted too fast, but that was part of the charm, like fleeting snow. Every cup she poured carried her quiet gift of comfort, a sweetness that outlasted the season itself. Heinz apple cider vinegar was not the star of the table, but without it, half the recipes would never have worked. Grandma used it for her red cabbage slaw, her pickled beets, and her Christmas chutneys that glistened like jewels in glass jars. The tang of vinegar filled the house days before Christmas as she prepared batches for neighbors and family. It cut through the sweetness of the season, giving everything balance. She always bought extra bottles, certain she would need more. There was something honest about that sharp, clean scent. It spoke of hard work and preservation, of old traditions carried through new times. Heinz vinegar turned simple vegetables into something festive, something alive. Every jar she sealed was a promise of flavor, care, and patience. It was not the kind of ingredient people admired, but they tasted its presence in every dish. When she opened a bottle, that first whiff always brought back memories of her mother's kitchen, where vinegar meant thrift and creativity. In a decade full of convenience foods and new gadgets, Grandma's use of Heinz vinegar was a reminder that some ingredients held deeper meaning than taste. They held memory itself. The golden liquid tied past to present, turning simple produce into something worthy of celebration. Every time she labeled a jar or poured it into a simmering pot, she was bottling more than flavor. She was preserving her own history. Smucker's apricot preserves were Grandma's secret weapon for turning any main dish into something memorable. She would spread it beneath the glaze of her Christmas ham, watching as the golden fruit cooked into a sticky sweetness that caught the light. The scent was both savory and sunny, filling the kitchen with warmth. Sometimes she spooned a bit onto toast while she cooked, unable to resist its rich, smooth flavor. Smucker's was more than a jam. It was a bridge between sweet and salt, old and new. It caramelized beautifully, clinging to meat like a coat of glass. When guests cut into the ham, they would always ask what made it taste so different, and Grandma would simply smile. That little jar made magic happen every December, proving that simplicity could shine brighter than anything extravagant. It was also her secret to balancing the chaos of cooking, adding brightness wherever things felt too heavy. The preserves went into glazes, cookies, even sauces for chicken, when Christmas leftovers stretched thin. Its scent lingered long after dinner ended, wrapping the house in the comfort of something both simple and luxurious. Smucker's was the essence of the holidays in one jar, sweet, golden, and always dependable. It reminded everyone that joy could come from the smallest, stickiest things. McCormick Red Cinnamon Drops were the candy that snuck its way into everything. Grandma kept a jar of them for cookies, cider, and even decorations. The color alone made her smile, tiny red gems that sparkled like Christmas lights. She would press one into the center of sugar cookies or drop a handful into her simmering cider until the kitchen smelled like pure warmth. They melted slowly, tinting drinks a deep ruby and leaving a faint heat that lingered on your tongue. It was a small touch, but it made everything feel more alive. Children loved them for their color. Adults loved them for the nostalgia. McCormick Cinnamon Drops were a reminder that even the smallest things could make a holiday shine brighter. Sometimes Grandma would crush a few to mix into frosting, leaving little bursts of spice in every bite. Other times, she strung them like beads onto cookie ribbons to hang on the tree. The house smelled like sugar and cinnamon for days. They were candy, decoration, and memory all at once. A simple pleasure that carried an entire season inside its sweetness. In the middle of a busy holiday kitchen, those tiny red drops caught the light and made even the plainest moments feel special. Spry pie crust mix was the kind of helper Grandma kept hidden until she truly needed it. A pre-mixed blend of flour and shortening, it saved her tired hands on long baking days. She called it her Christmas backup plan. It gave her pies that same flaky texture she was known for, even when she was too busy to start from scratch. The box was plain but dependable, a quiet promise of success. She used it for apple, pecan, and chocolate pies alike, never once feeling guilty about the shortcut. Spry was her secret relief, a small grace during the chaos of the holidays. When guests praised her crust, she would smile, never letting on that her secret came from a box. In the end, no one cared. What mattered was the love baked inside. The Spry mix stood for something greater than convenience. It was the balance between tradition and change. It showed that care could come in many forms, even in something store-bought. When the oven timer chimed and the scent of baking pies filled the air, the mix's magic became indistinguishable from homemade. It carried the spirit of the era, when women worked smarter, not harder, and still made beauty out of simplicity. Instant mashed potato flakes from Idahoan were Grandma's not-so-secret trick for surviving Christmas cooking. She bought them early, stacking the boxes like treasure. They were used in casseroles, soups, and to thicken gravies when things got too thin. The flakes looked like nothing, but they transformed under her touch, turning into creamy, buttery comfort in minutes. On busy days, she mixed them with a little sour cream and chives, and everyone swore they were homemade. They were a safety net, Warm, reliable, and ready for anything. Grandma never bragged about them, but she knew exactly how much easier they made her life. In the chaos of Christmas dinner, they were the quiet hero no one noticed, but everyone enjoyed. The Idahoan boxes lined her pantry shelf, symbols of practicality dressed as luxury. They freed her to focus on what really mattered: conversation, laughter, and keeping everyone fed. To her, these flakes represented modern progress wrapped in a humble package. Each serving felt like victory in disguise, a small miracle of efficiency and care. Every spoonful tasted like home, not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. Carnation breakfast bars were Grandma's secret weapon before sunrise on Christmas morning. While the house slept, she unwrapped one, poured her coffee, and started her day. Those chewy bars were packed with oats, milk, and chocolate, everything she needed to keep going through hours of cooking. They tasted simple, comforting, and a little nostalgic, like the idea of nutrition meeting indulgence. She never told anyone that was her breakfast, but you could see the empty wrapper tucked behind the flour tin. It was her private ritual, her little moment of peace before the chaos began. Carnation bars kept her standing, smiling and humming through the morning. They were fuel made for mothers and grandmothers, the quiet strength behind every Christmas feast. They were also a glimpse into the future, a time when women began leaning on convenience without apology. That small bar symbolized independence, self-care, and quiet resilience. Between batches of cookies and roasts, she took a bite, savoring both energy and solitude. It was not fancy, but it was enough, and that was all she needed to keep Christmas running. Hominy casserole was golden comfort baked into a dish that smelled like warmth and community. Cooked hominy, soft kernels of corn, was mixed with melted cheese, milk, and butter, then spread into a casserole dish and topped with breadcrumbs for that perfect crunch. When it baked, the top browned beautifully, crisp around the edges, while the inside turned creamy and rich. The scent of butter and corn filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of coffee, pies, and conversation. It was mild, mellow, and deeply Southern, made for church potlucks, family gatherings, and winter suppers where food meant togetherness. Every scoop held the taste of home, soft and satisfying, with the kind of richness that didn't need dressing up. In the 1950s, dishes like this were passed around on long folding tables under buzzing lights, each one proudly homemade. You could almost hear the laughter echoing off the linoleum floors as plates clinked and stories passed hands. Hominy casserole wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was food that fed both body and spirit, warm, generous, and impossible to forget. Tom and Jerry Holiday Punch wasn't a cartoon. It was the drink that made Christmas evenings glow. Made from beaten eggs, sugar, brandy, and rum, it was warm, foamy, and rich enough to chase the chill from any snowstorm. Families would gather around the punch bowl as steam rose from the mugs, the scent of nutmeg hanging in the air. It wasn't a fancy cocktail, it was home comfort in liquid form. Every sip carried the cheer of togetherness and the kind of laughter that only came once a year. It took patience to make, stirring the eggs until they turned to silk, whisking the heat just right. One wrong move and it would curdle, so you had to care about it, like most things that truly mattered. As instant mixes and bottled drinks replaced homemade warmth, the Tom and Jerry slipped into memory. But for those who tasted it, the holidays have never felt quite as alive again. In the 2010s, and I'm sure a lot of you can remember this, standing rib roasts were the undisputed top dog. It seemed like a complete 180 too. It felt like the general stance went from, "We need keto, our kids need to eat more vegetables," back to as much McDonald's as a human stomach can possibly contain. Somewhere along the line, standing rib roasts became the ideal Christmas meal. It had already been a staple for so long in American culture, so it wasn't like people were doing anything that was very innovative or new, but the 2000s have been full of attempts at reviving old culture and bringing back dishes and cooking practices from the 20th century as much as they've been about exploring new frontiers. With rib roasts, there was this need for a return to classic comfort foods that people had grown up with. A lot of Americans also grew up on the things we were discussing previously, namely canned processed food, and they had forgotten the simple joy of working with whole cuts of meat. Sweet potato egg bakes are kind of the same as the biscuits, because while they're really easy to make and they have enough flavor to justify a trip to the kitchen, they just don't have the same star power or enough health benefits for most people to keep the recipe on their roster for a long period of time. They're a mix of eggs, roasted sweet potatoes, cheese, and your favorite kind of vegetables. It involves a lot of layering since it's meant to resemble a typical casserole more than anything else. Unfortunately, that gives it the downsides of casseroles too, since those are always really hearty dishes you make to fill up an entire family. The upsides it has aren't as good as an actual cassie, so a lot of people debated just going straight for a typical casserole when they were making this over a few weeks. People eventually made the shift towards lighter breakfasts and left this recipe on the benches, never to be seen again in the mainstream. Sausage gravy over toasted bread is a traditional Southern breakfast that for a long time was the heart and soul of the South, especially in places like Texas. You should not confuse this with country gravy because there is a stark difference between the two. See, country gravy does not have the juicy, mouth-watering, glorious addition of animal fat involved in the process. Sausage gravy, on the other hand, uses loose pork sausages, and once the meat is rendered, it takes the fat and mixes it with flour to make the roux and thicken the gravy. You pair that up with some perfectly golden brown toasted bread, and you are in for a world of culinary delight. The best part was that you could amp up the smoky sausage flavor by just adding more sausage to the gravy or keep it toned down for a milder taste. Either way, an incredibly yummy and economical breakfast. Sausage gravy over toasted bread is a traditional Southern breakfast that for a long time was the heart and soul of the South, especially in places like Texas. You should not confuse this with country gravy because there is a stark difference between the two. See, country gravy does not have the juicy, mouth-watering, glorious addition of animal fat involved in the process. Sausage gravy, on the other hand, uses loose pork sausages, and once the meat is rendered, it takes the fat and mixes it with flour to make the roux and thicken the gravy. You pair that up with some perfectly golden brown toasted bread, and you are in for a world of culinary delight. The best part was that you could amp up the smoky sausage flavor by just adding more sausage to the gravy or keep it toned down for a milder taste. Either way, an incredibly yummy and economical breakfast. Mincemeat pie with suet was the heart of Christmas for generations, the kind of dessert that smelled like comfort and memory. The filling was thick and dark, heavy with beef fat, raisins, apples, and cloves, all cooked slow until the sweetness turned deep and spiced. Every slice was a reminder that celebration meant richness, even when the world outside was cold and gray. It was a pie that took time, patience, and a steady hand. There was nothing quick about it. The suet made it soft but strong, holding together the fruits like a secret too good to share. Grandmothers passed down the recipe like a family treasure, handwritten and stained with years of use. When margarine and vegetable shortening took over, the old way began to fade, called outdated and too heavy. But those who remember it swear no modern dessert has ever come close to that aroma from the oven on Christmas Eve. So, braised veal with olives was a staple in English menus in the 18th century. This Mediterranean-inspired dish involved slow-cooking veal with a combination of olives, tomatoes, garlic, and white wine, resulting in a tender, flavorful meal. Similar dishes are familiar in the cuisines of other countries, including France, Italy, Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic. This dish was often served with crusty bread or mashed potatoes and was a hit at potlucks. So, why did this one fade away into history? Well, look around. Who eats veal anymore? Not me. But if your grandparents are ever craving a delicious bite of their childhood, you might want to whip this up for them. Cat head biscuits, on the other hand, are this Southern classic that takes next to nothing to make and are a recipe that everyone and their mother is a little too familiar with. These thick, fluffy, and generously sized biscuits only need your most everyday pantry staples. Just a bit of flour, butter, milk, and baking powder will take care of your preparation needs. There's also a reason they're named after cat heads, and it's thanks to the disproportionate size of the biscuits when compared to other recipes. On the flip side, that made them perfect for binging, especially as a snack while TV time was happening or as a quick and easily munchable breakfast. The thing is, this dish has everything going for it except one aspect. You can't take any shortcuts when it comes to cat head biscuits, and as good as a dish might be, it would never last in the face of convenience culture, which was slowly sweeping up American diets one by one, state by state in its new easy-to-sustain diets. Since the theme today is breakfasts that have vanished, especially the holiday ones, there's no better relic to talk about and end it on than frumenty. This wheat dish, made by boiling the wheat in milk and water and sweetening it with warm spices, was something that found its heyday back in the Middle Ages. People would have it in sweet and savory versions, and it was actually a really popular feast item, especially in the colder months around Christmas. Eventually, it became a breakfast staple thanks to grain-based breakfasts being the undisputed top dogs in American diets. But thanks to a much more globalized culture that draws on easy-to-make recipes from all around the world, things that did well in medieval Europe just don't have that same pull with the people anymore. Plus, grains became popular, but that doesn't mean all the ways of making them had the same success. Frumenty was seen as a complicated dish that was more effort than it was worth, especially in the face of dishes and convenience food that was tailor-made for the modern American citizen. Watergate cakes were another hit dessert in the 1970s, particularly in 1972 when the Watergate scandal occurred. A Watergate cake is a layer cake made of pistachio and often has mousse frosting, although it can contain other ingredients too, like diced pineapple and marshmallows. Despite its questionable political rep, it actually was popular enough in 1975 to increase shortages for pistachios all around Washington. That too near Christmas season, folks were baking. That many of them, but we bet you have never heard of a Watergate cake before. Sadly, it is a forgotten relic gone from tables nowadays. Modern-day Christmas cakes look like lots of ice or vanilla frosting, and the pistachio flavor is not too much of a hot pick in the baking industry. Still, we definitely would have loved to try a slice of this green-colored beauty. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Harvard beets brought color and character to the winter table, gleaming like tiny jewels under the soft glow of kitchen light. Sliced thin and simmered in a blend of vinegar, sugar, and butter, they transformed from simple roots into something glossy, fragrant, and unforgettable. The sauce thickened slowly, clinging to each slice in a ruby glaze that shimmered like glass. When spooned onto a plate, their deep red stood out against the pale tones of mashed potatoes and the dark browns of roasts. The flavor was a perfect balance, sweet, tart, and just a little smoky, cutting through heavy gravies with a clean brightness that woke up the palate. They were proof that even the humblest vegetable could taste like luxury when treated with care. In early American kitchens, Harvard beets were a point of pride, the kind of dish that made a simple meal feel special. Adults savored them while children pushed them aside, but everyone remembered their shine. Served warm, they tasted like thrift turned to art. Simple ingredients transformed into something extraordinary. Harvard beets were both beauty and nourishment, a reminder that a little vinegar, sugar, and patience could turn the ordinary into the unforgettable. So, with meat becoming a bit heavier on the wallet and with tastes going towards things that were lighter on the stomach as well as your finances, roast beef became something of a mass favorite. The post-World War II boom in the economy did continue to the 1960s, and I know that when I say the costs of meat kept going up, that doesn't make too much sense since people should have been able to afford it, right? Well, without going too much into economics, it wasn't that much of a boost that people could afford it annually and regularly. Beef, on the other hand, was still well within the reach of most people's monthly budgets, and thanks to advances in refrigeration and the concept of a fridge becoming something that the public was trying to adapt on a wide scale, beef only became more and more popular. You could now make the same cuts of beef last a lot longer thanks to refrigeration. Also, farming practices were benefiting from new technology too, as transporting beef from cattle farms back to urban cities and hubs was easier than ever, meaning there was more to sell in the markets than ever before. All right, now that the boring stuff is out of the way, let's talk about the actual foodie bits. Roast beef had always been a big part of the West's diet and culinary identity, and no one's denying that. It was a centerpiece for all kinds of celebratory dishes, especially Christmas. Plus, it was also seen as a status symbol. You know how today if we see a family go out for crab every week, we know they're well off? Well, it's the same thing for roast beef in the 60s. If you ever wanted to make your family feel well-fed and taken care of, you'd go for roast beef during the holidays, no question. Plus, it was just built for family dining. You could feed everybody in the house guaranteed and still have leftovers the next day, and who's really going to say that's a bad deal? Plus, thanks to things settling down, most suburbs were in full swing with non-stop parties and celebrations, especially around Christmas. And as a host, it'd be criminal not to have some of the stuff up in the menu. Things like this made it more a status symbol than a recipe as it took on a life of its own. But if you really got down to it, people were coming for the taste, no matter how much they convinced themselves that it made them seem richer. Don't get me wrong, you definitely weren't hurting if you could afford to splurge on it, but even people that couldn't would save up for it because it just tasted that good. Unfortunately, by the 70s, another round of inflation hit the masses and made large cuts that became a lot more unreasonable as a holiday feast item. Then, health trends also started shifting towards leaner and greener eating, thanks to concerns around the rising rates of heart-related incidents in the youth and the general public. Also, by this point in time, Americans were really committing to exploring other cultures. This is something I've mentioned before too, but it really peaked around these 2 decades. As a result, it became a little uncommon to serve roasted beef. You know, we never really talk enough about the Scottish aspects of our country. Let's fix that with rumble thumps. And yes, that is exactly what it's actually called. This Scottish dish is a hallmark of their tradition, made with mashed potatoes mixed into a cabbage casserole that's been baked thoroughly with cheese and butter. It's rustic, it's right from the Scottish Highlands, and it's a great way to get rid of some leftover vegetables that are on the verge of spoiling, so naturally, it was definitely in a lot of people's options. Plus, there was this entire phase of the start of the second half of the 20th century, where Americans as a whole took after Christopher Columbus and decided to see what else the world had to offer. Only this time, instead of uncharted land, they weren't around looking for new recipes from countries and their cuisines. That's how we picked up rumbledy thumps, after all. It didn't help that America had vibrant immigrant communities from just about every culture in the world. The simple truth is that this dish tastes good, but it couldn't keep up with the times. It takes a lot of work, it's a little too heavy, and it's just not well known enough anymore. Fast food, takeouts, and Instagram-worthy food often ended up taking precedence over regional rustic dishes like this one, and they couldn't really keep up with the competition anymore. Over time, it only got less and less exposure, and people eventually ended up forgetting all about this little fragment of Scottish culture. Raspberry Bavarian cakes were the pearl of any feast, with all eyes firmly glued to the cake's shine and noses pointed towards its ethereal aroma. You know when something passes you by and suddenly you forget the time and the conversation you were having? Your head just gets locked onto whatever whiff of magic just passed you by. People would often describe their first up-close contact with raspberry Bavarian cakes that way. Beautiful, but even tastier. They had a fluffy and melty creme anglaise base that had been folded multiple times in whipped cream. Raspberry Bavarian cakes were in cookbooks and magazines all over the nation in the 70s, and they were a way to make a statement, or to have one wedding cake you would not forget. We are definitely jealous of those who got to try a slice when it was in its prime. We are going to end the list with a show-stealing pound cake known as the Bishop's cake. Extremely popular in many high-profile cookbooks, such as the Silver Palette Cookbook, this butter pound cake delivered a very vibrant and fruity punch to your taste buds. Most bundt cakes at the time came saturated with alcohol-based syrups. However, Bishop's cakes would instead focus on a much thicker and flavorful glaze. Also, in our opinion, anything that leaves a solid vanilla aftertaste in your mouth is an instant buy. While the trend of fruitcakes was still popular and rising in America, these cakes certainly dominated the wave. Everything has a beginning and an end, though, and Bishop cakes met theirs when more traditional vanilla sponge and frosting cakes replaced fruitcakes as the new baking MVP. Celery root mash was the quiet elegance of 1970s holiday dining, where French refinement met American practicality. The rough, knobby root, unassuming and pale, hid a tender heart beneath its coarse skin. Peeled, diced, and simmered until soft, it was mashed with butter, cream, and a touch of salt until it turned smooth and velvety. Its flavor was delicate, a balance between potatoes' richness and celery's brightness, earthy but faintly floral. The first spoonful melted on the tongue, light but satisfying, filling the air with buttery calm. It was served beside roasted duck or beef, bringing refinement without pretense. Magazine spreads of the time praised it as modern, chic, and continental, but beneath its polish lived the same comfort found in any farmhouse mash. Its color was pale ivory, its texture a dream. Every bite felt thoughtful, measured, complete. Celery root mash proved that even the humblest vegetables could become something extraordinary when treated with care. A quiet triumph of simplicity turned sublime. One part of American culture that really never should have died off or leaned towards simplicity was fancy little holiday season variations like Christmas tree waffles. What were these? They were just your typical everyday waffles, same maple syrup, same time in the oven, same everything, but they had so much love poured into them. The idea here was to make it look like a Christmas tree, and people pulled out all the stops, the whole 9 yards, to make theirs resemble one as closely as possible. It even became like a community competition. That type of thing was so common to see in America during the 20th century, and it really added some personalization to the holiday season, which is sorely missing today. It was a way to have genuine fun with what you were eating and involved even kids in the cooking process. They'd love playing around with the frostings, sprinkles, and fruits so that they could have the most faithful Christmas tree pancakes on the block. Adults would similarly pour some real brain power into getting theirs to pop off. It was just a much more fun way to enjoy a classic we have every day in honor of Christmas, but nowadays, takeout culture and pre-made desserts from bakeries have replaced trends like that. People would rather make a charcuterie board over any decorative dessert today. Although potato au gratin originated in 16th century Europe, its roots in the United States can be traced to French-American communities in North America. Gratin refers to a culinary technique where a dish is topped with a browned crust. This can be made using grated cheese or breadcrumbs, or even butter and eggs. In potato au gratin, most of the time people use grated cheese or breadcrumbs to add a crispier crunch to what is already a perfect combo of baked sliced potatoes, cream, and sometimes dates. Think of it as the ultimate version of baked mashed potatoes. Despite sounding fancy, it is actually one of the simplest dishes you can add to your holiday menu. Chestnut puree was quiet elegance spooned beside a roast, smooth as velvet and sweet with the memory of smoke. Chestnuts were roasted, peeled, and mashed with butter, cream, and sugar until the mixture turned golden and silken. The flavor was gentle yet complex, nutty, faintly caramel-like, touched with the taste of the fire. Served warm beside turkey or beef, it felt indulgent without needing to show off. In the early 1900s, it graced both grand dining rooms and humble kitchens, a symbol of refinement that still knew how to comfort. The texture mirrored mashed potatoes, but its taste carried winter's heart, soft, rich, and a little nostalgic. It paired beautifully with gravies and roasts, balancing their depth with quiet sweetness. Making it took time and patience, the kind only holidays allowed. Each spoonful felt like celebration itself, simple, elegant, and timeless. Chestnut puree was food for the soul, a forgotten treasure waiting to be remembered. Sometimes things just get old, and sometimes they just don't work. We've had our fair share of both, and scones with clotted cream and jam are a bit of a mix of the two. Now, US and UK cuisines don't generally tend to mix, even though we've had lots of crossovers in the past now. Scones with cream and jam, at least these ones that would use clotted cream, were the quintessential British snack. If your idea of John, 32 from West Virginia, is somebody in plaid or flannel getting real intimate with a hot dog, then your idea of Martin, 28 from Birmingham, is somebody in a blazer enjoying a scone. It's just what we associate with the people, you know? These scones were something that immigrants from the UK brought on over with them, and don't get me wrong, in their parts of the country where there would be large British-American presences, it definitely was something that got a lot of mileage. In other places, it just wasn't really that much of a hit, and clotted cream wasn't really something a lot of people had access to. Kind of a bummer when your core ingredient ends up being in short supply for the masses, but maybe this one staying a niche secret is a good thing. I'm not the biggest scone fan after all, but this is all about you, so how do you feel about this little treat? Sometimes things just get old, and sometimes they just don't work. We've had our fair share of both, and scones with clotted cream and jam are a bit of a mix of the two. Now, US and UK cuisines don't generally tend to mix, even though we've had lots of crossovers in the past now. Scones with cream and jam, at least these ones that would use clotted cream, were the quintessential British snack. If your idea of John, 32 from West Virginia, is somebody in plaid or flannel getting real intimate with a hot dog, then your idea of Martin, 28 from Birmingham, is somebody in a blazer enjoying a scone. It's just what we associate with the people, you know? These scones were something that immigrants from the UK brought on over with them, and don't get me wrong, in their parts of the country where there would be large British-American presences, it definitely was something that got a lot of mileage. In other places, it just wasn't really that much of a hit, and clotted cream wasn't really something a lot of people had access to. Kind of a bummer when your core ingredient ends up being in short supply for the masses, but maybe this one staying a niche secret is a good thing. I'm not the biggest scone fan after all, but this is all about you, so how do you feel about this little treat? Shoofly pie is a pie that first got its start in America's food history in Pennsylvania Dutch country as the go-to for when people had a crumb craving. Wanted a pie that had a crunchy crust and a crumb-filled topping? Shoofly pie was on speed dial and also on every bakery shelf in the 70s, just waiting to arrive at your doorstep. A molasses filling inside a sizable crust was the apple of every Pennsylvania resident's eye, and soon the infection would spread. People from every state started adopting their own versions of shoofly pies, although when the itch came for an authentic, flavorful shoofly, a road trip to Pennsylvania was in order. I guess when a dish boosts tourism for your state, you can officially consider it good. Those same folks now visit for other reasons since shoofly have flown away from bakeries. Maple glazed acorn squash was the kind of side dish that made the kitchen smell like the season itself. The squash was halved, seeds scooped out, and baked until its flesh softened and deepened in color. Then came the glaze. A mix of butter and maple syrup brushed across the top until it shimmered. Back in the oven it went, roasting slowly until the edges caramelized and the centers turned silky. The aroma that filled the air was sweet and woodsy, a hint of maple mixing with the warmth of roasted squash. When pulled from the oven, it gleamed like amber under the light, soft but still holding its shape. Each bite blended savory and sweet, earthy and bright, like a conversation between autumn and winter. It was a dish that needed no decoration, its natural beauty already enough. Served beside roast turkey or ham, it brought balance and warmth to every plate. Maple glazed acorn squash was nature turned into art, simple, wholesome, and full of comfort, meant to be shared with love. Wheatena was yet another wheat-based hot cereal that was a really good choice for a while thanks to the high fiber content and the organic focus on grainy goodness, but it couldn't last overall thanks to, well, and there's no easy way to say this, it just doesn't taste that good. At least not by modern standards, which have largely shifted away from grain-based meals and breakfasts. The thing is, You can't be good at just one thing when it comes to lasting in a country with so much culinary competition. America's one gigantic melting pot of cultures, foods, and different cuisines, so the people are a little spoiled too. How can they not be? There's just so much to pull from. And that's very much a good thing since it gives us a lot of options and a refined palate, which isn't really a mold Wheatna fits into. People wanted a middle ground between healthy and tasty, and Wheatna leaned way more towards the former. If one of these foods reminded you of Grandma's kitchen, share your favorite in the comments and remember to like and subscribe for more sweet memories.